Folks, welcome back to the Soul Sessions. I'm your host, Soul. But please, folks, bow down, for we have the savior of not only ICW, but wrestling as a whole, a walking, living piece of art, former ICW Zero G champion, Theo Doros. Thank you, savior, for appearing on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Glad to hear, my friend. But Theo, what I like to know about all guests, I want to know the beginning of everyone's story. How did you fall in love with professional wrestling?
It was just watching TV. My dad was watching TV, flicking through the channels, and it was a promo from The Rock, as Hollywood Rock. I think it was that got me hooked. No, it wouldn't have been. Sorry, it wouldn't have been Hollywood Rock. It would have been Rock building up to his match with Hogan. So it would have been the year before.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, WrestleMania 18 was the first time I sort of in the build up to that. Whereas when I fell in love with wrestling, I just saw The Rock cutting a promo. I thought he was the coolest guy in the world, and just ever since then, it was just like I fell in love with wrestling, watching The Rock, watching Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, all those guys, Triple H, the big larger than life characters.
indeed, they were. And character work is a very important thing within the whole wrestling world. Some say it's yourself turned up to 11, or some say it's a side of yourself you don't want to reveal. Who do you think, Theo, are some of the best character works in all of wrestling?
Um, Again, Hogan. I mean, just probably the best character ever.
Mm.
Just so much larger than life. Just everything about him was just over the top. It made you invest in him because he was so invested in his own character. Um, Everything about him was believable.
Mm.
Um, Again, you look at um, Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin, as the ringmaster, some of the best technical matches he had. But then it was only when he became Stone Cold where people really started to resonate with him and just that character. He believed everything he said. Um, Again, it's just those are the sort of characters where it's nothing too over the top and wacky. It's
Mm.
just these guys, like you said, turned up to 11. And when they really invest in the character themselves, that's when they believe it, it makes the audience believe it a lot more as well.
Of course, you got to really drag in the audience and make them care about what's going on in the ring at the end of the day. But Phil, what happened in from you to go from a fan to decide I want to do this full time? I want to become a wrestler.
It was just one where I was in a chip shop, believe it or not, and I saw a flyer for my local wrestling promotion, Reckless Intent. And I had absolutely zero idea that there was wrestling in Scotland outside of ICW, which I'd seen through the BBC documentary.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I didn't know that there was wrestling in Scotland up until then. And I saw the flyer, and then I followed them on Facebook, and then I followed them from just keeping up with it for a bit. And I'm always somebody who's athletic. I like competition. I guess I like training for something. I like being involved in something. I played football. I
Ah,
still do, but back then I played a lot of football, and I was falling out of love with it. And then eventually I was like, no, I want something that's going to excite me again. And I thought I'm going to try wrestling. And it was just that me loving being involved in some form of competitive sport,
mhm.
where I thought I'm not getting the enjoyment and the fulfillment from football anymore. Wrestling's something I've loved since I was a kid. At the time, I watched it religiously as well. So I was like, I'm going to go and try this and see if I'm any good at it, see if I enjoy it, and here we are. 8 years later, I'm still involved.
Yeah, one day you're going out for the chips and a kebab, and next thing you know, you're wrestling on the WWE network. I mean, hell, that's a hell of a story if I've ever heard one, my friend.
Yeah, yeah. It was one where when I started wrestling, I didn't really realize how independent wrestling in Scotland worked.
Mhm.
I thought if this is something I do maybe once or twice a month or something, it'll be good and just do it to have a bit of fun, see how long it goes for. Again, not really expecting that that bridge almost between independent wrestling in Scotland and wrestling on the WWE network, for example. It's just something I never thought would happen. It's not something I got into wrestling to achieve, but here we are.
Here we are indeed. And you mentioned your background with football as well. Was it how transitioning from football to wrestling? Was there certain aspects of it that helped with the training? Being a goalie or something like that, or tackling on the field with football. Did that kind of help?
So it's nothing football specific, but I do think that coming from a sporting background gives anyone an edge who's starting wrestling because you can be coached, and that's one thing that I do think gave me a bit of an upper hand going into wrestling. Is that one, I was already athletic, I was already in decent shape, could move about, had good cardio, was relatively strong, and I know what it's like to be given instructions, to follow the instructions, and to be given advice, feedback on what to do to improve, on what you can do to make things better. So that's having that sporting background definitely helped learning to wrestle. Just knowing how to be coached, knowing how to take feedback on board, knowing what you need to do to improve, knowing that you just need to get reps and reps and reps in, and that's the best way to improve.
No, of course, training is a very important thing, and I've always been interested about whenever I have guests on, I'm always interested about their training regime. For yourself, Theo, what kind of your training regimes? And mostly focused on diet based, or arms, legs, or sort of cardio?
So again, this is me having too many fingers in too many holes, probably. I compete in bodybuilding as well. I've done 2 bodybuilding shows, one in 2019, one in 2021, and then there's going to be another one, at least one more in 2024. So my training is quite demanding in terms of trying to strike the right balance between performance for wrestling and the football I do play, but mainly performance for wrestling, mainly to look the part for wrestling while depending on what I'm doing in terms of focusing on bodybuilding as well. So, for example, now when I'm trying to gain size, it's trying to get the hybrid of aesthetics and just getting the bodybuilding style training while keeping in training style that's going to help me perform well in the ring while trying not to put on too much body fat so I still look the part. It's quite intense. It involves religiously tracking food. It involves going to the gym 6 times a week at least. It involves cardio to make sure I'm still in cardio shape. It involves a lot of flexibility and yoga work to make sure I'm allowing my body to recover. So it's pretty much a full-time job in itself, really. And it's one thing I do think a lot of wrestlers need to be aware of coming in, or sort of if you're coming into the wrestling business, is there's a big debate on being in shape, and I know it kicked off on Twitter, I think a year or so ago. While I don't think every wrestler should look like a bodybuilder because it would be boring if everyone was kicking about looking the exact same, I do think that when you are wrestling, you should be strong enough and fit enough that you can look after yourself, you can look after your opponent, and that you look like you belong in a wrestling ring. Because at the end of the day, if accidents happen in wrestling and it's part of the business, but if it's come from somebody who's just neglecting the strength side of trade, like strength training side of things, to get to the point where they should be comfortable doing certain moves which involve taking an opponent's body into their hands. I think that's one where wrestlers should be really prioritizing themselves, is making sure they're strong enough and fit enough that that's not going to be what causes an injury to themselves or an opponent. They should make sure they're in ring shape more than in aesthetic physical shape.
Of course, with wrestling, you could get injured being on a big pay-per-view match or a TV show match or even training as well. And, you're not only looking after yourself, but you have to look after the opponent as well. You're going into this together at the end of the day. I want to say, Theo, have you ever seen someone try like, oh, I want to be like a high flyer, but you've seen yourself like, you need to, it's not physically possible for you?
I've never seen that. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't be my place to tell somebody you can't do that. All I could say, and again, it's never happened with me. All I could say to somebody is, if that is the route you're wanting to go down, then you would need to improve X, Y, and Z before you could try it. So yeah, again, if somebody wants to try and be a high flyer, if somebody wants to try and be a big strong man, or a body guy, then by all means they can work towards it, as long as they know these are the steps you need to do, or these are the steps you need to take in order to get to that. And you can't just go in there and just do a swanton bomb off the top and expect
Mm.
that to be enough, essentially.
No, of course. And you mentioned, training as well, and diet's a very important thing. We had Kid Cymru down from Wales, and he's done some bodybuilding competition, and he said his best prep meal was just grilled chicken and asparagus. Hell of a combo. But what about you, Theo? What's your, training meal that you prep?
So I'm probably the worst bodybuilder there is. As part of, I'm a certified nutritionist as well,
Oh, damn.
level 4 strength and conditioning coach, personal trainer, the lot. Um, so I very much I don't go down the whole chicken and broccoli route, unless I'm maybe a month or two off stage. That's when I'll turn to that sort of stuff. The main part for my usual days, for breakfast, I'll have an egg white omelette with turkey bacon, mushrooms, and some fruit. Then for lunch, it'll be something. I tend to have quite a late breakfast, so my lunch is something small. I'll have a few rice cakes with some form of protein, yogurt, and more fruit. And then for dinner, it'll usually be either potatoes and fish with veg, or it'll be rice and fish, or chicken and veg, or pasta with chicken and veg. It's quite basic. To be honest, and I eat pretty much the same things every day. And then I add little things. For example, now when I'm gaining, I have room to have a bowl of cereal at night. I have room to fit in some chocolate or some sweets or something. And then when I start dieting, that's when I sort of reduce the junk food, sort of say.
Mhm. Oh, hey, not only the savior of professional wrestling, but the savior of your meal plans as well. Who
Pretty
knows
much.
what? Now, Theo, I know you mentioned Reckless there, who you kind of were introduced by, and I know you were winning 3 championships for them. Intent Hardcore, the Intent Slam, and the Tag Team Champions as well. Winning those titles, what did they mean to you? Was that sort of like a validation?
So yeah, so I've actually won four
Ah,
titles at Reckless. The only one I didn't win was the UK one. So the first one I won was the Slam title, which was quite cool. Again, I won that, I think, maybe a year after starting training. It was more sort of a trainee title, and
mhm.
then it sort of graduated beyond that. So I started off winning that. I had a very brief stint with the hardcore title, which I think was literally just one show. I won it and lost it on the same day,
Ah,
um, and it was just it was good fun, and yeah, winning those two titles was quite cool. They were quite it was fun. It was nice. The slam one probably meant a bit more, um, just almost with it being sort of for the trainees. It was just like, you're doing really well at this, here's a wee reward. um then the tag titles I won with Michael Chase, one of my really really good friends now.
mm,
um he trained me, massive mentor, so to be able to win the tag titles with him was really really cool. And it was one where he's somebody whose career was unfortunately cut short because of injury.
mm.
um, we had some really good matches against each other and tagging with him, and some of my most fun matches were tagging with him. And again, it was nice being in that position where I'm getting to tag with a friend, a mentor, win titles, wrestle against some of the best teams in the country. I mean, um, it was a lot of fun. And then I actually did become Reckless Intent heavyweight champion. Technically the longest reigning Reckless Intent heavyweight champion
Hey.
ever. But a lot of that is down to the fact that I held it over COVID. So I won it about 5-6 months before COVID kicked in, and then I held it for about maybe a year after. Um, so yeah, the only title I didn't win at Reckless was the UK title, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a great place. It was a lovely. I loved wrestling at Reckless. The crowds were cracking. Some of the guys backstage there were phenomenal. I got to wrestle some of my favorite matches. Probably my favorite ever match I wrestled at Reckless as well. And there's a lot of the trainees and the guys who wrestle at Reckless who unfortunately don't get the recognition I think they deserve, and they don't get as many opportunities as I think they should.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, Reckless was it was my home, and it's the reason I'm here today.
Yeah, you never forget home. You know, at the end of the day, it's always special to you. You know, you mentioned you not knowing much about the independent scene, and then you would branch out. You know, you've done some places elsewhere. Branching out, was that like you felt like you had to do it the next challenge, or was it quite daunting?
It just sort of happened, really. It's not something I ever really considered. Again, it was more just quite early on. Again, in my career, I got the chance to wrestle elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe 2 or 3 months after I'd had my first match, I had the chance to wrestle elsewhere. I actually got to wrestle Big Damo as well, which was really cool. Unfortunately, we've not had a match since then, but it's one I'd like to have. So yeah, and it just sort of happened from there, and then more companies would start to get in touch, and I'd start to get in touch with other companies and stuff as well. And it was one of those things where I'm not I'm not the most organized or thought out person in the world. I don't forward plan much at all. I
Mm-hmm.
just tend to just take life as it comes, I guess. Um, and then just as opportunities present themselves and as possibilities present themselves and stuff, it just sort of happens. The opportunities come, the branching out just sort of happened, and next thing I knew, I was wrestling down in England, or I was wrestling away up north in Scotland. I went across to Greece to take a seminar. um so it just, and that's all just sort of stuff that just organically happened without me sort of setting targets or anything. And it's pretty much just how I'm gonna keep going, to be honest.
Hell, it's a hell of a plan, my friend. You mentioned going to Greece for a seminar. It must have been a hell of a seminar. What was that all about?
So it was literally just, obviously, my moniker is the Superior Cypriot, is what I'm known as. And I think a lot. I'm not sure how many people actually know that it's not just a gimmick. I am legitimately Cypriot. Um, I lived in Cyprus until I was 16. My dad and his entire family are Cypriot. I'm fluent in Greek. Um, and it's one where somebody from Greece just reached out. He was an ICW fan. He'd seen me wrestle an ICW in, I think it was 2017 or 2018. He'd seen me wrestle an ICW in a tag match, and he just contacted me saying that he was trying to help get wrestling in Greece up and running, try to get more promotions and stuff there, and asked if I would go over to take a seminar and just almost put them through sort of the training and stuff we do over here. So yeah, that's how that came about. And it was, I'd never actually been to Greece. I mean, I've lived in Cyprus my pretty much my entire childhood and my
Mm-hmm.
teenage years. So then when I got to go to Greece for the first time, it was really cool, and it's somewhere that I'm hoping to go back at some point as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Theo Doros taking over Greece. I think that's a hell of a plan, my friend. But you know, before we get into ICW, there's a one match I want to touch upon where you know, came to Discovery Wrestling in Edinburgh and you faced the Y Division champion at the time, Joe Hendry. Joe's a
Yeah.
hell of a man. I want to know about that match.
So that was one of the that was one of my first matches, my first long matches, post COVID,
Mm,
in front of a crowd. I'd done obviously some behind closed doors tapings and stuff, but I think that was maybe my third or fourth match. I can't remember back. Once shows had properly started up and running, because it was the first Discovery show back. So being trusted with that, you know, main event in first show back, in front of fans, was a massive honor from Alan, and to be able to go and do it with a guy as good as Joe Hendry
mm-hmm,
was class as well. And it was just such a great experience. It was a test, one of the biggest tests I've ever had, in terms of putting on a match worthy of Discovery main event.
mm,
Um, to go as long as we did, was it was good. It was challenging, and it was one where Joe wrestles a style of wrestling I love, where it's um not just all about moves. It's about
mm,
trying to tell a story. It's about an athletic contest. So it's one of my favorite matches, especially post COVID. It's one of my favorite matches.
mm.
Unfortunately, obviously, I didn't pick up the Y Division title, but Discovery is a phenomenal company. Again, a company I think doesn't get the recognition it deserves. All the work Alan puts into it is it shows in the quality of the shows. So again, with the quality of cards that Discovery has, to be able to main event their first show back was was truly quite humbling. Um, and I think me and Joe went out. We had a really good match, and I think it's one that I'm definitely going to look back on as one of my favorites of all time. I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who knows? Maybe you can get your revenge on Joe and take his Impact Digital Media Championship and bring that here to Scotland.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? But now on to ICW. You know, ICW so popular in Scotland and even with the world as well. I want to know when you first got the call, hey, come and work an ICW show. What did that, feel? Was that just like a holy shit, I'm doing this?
So again, I wrestled. So I'd worked for ICW twice before COVID. Once, oh, for the life of me, I can't remember the years. My memory is not great. I think it was 2018. I think, um, and again, it was me and Michael Chase tagging against Polar Promotions.
Mm,
We had a really fun match, really good match, and then we tagged there again against Ashton and Rampage, the POD. So I'd had two matches, I think, in 2018, and they were like getting the message of you're doing ICW was surreal, especially as the first time was literally we got a message. Me and Mikey got the message on the Wednesday saying, "Hey guys, are you available for Sunday?" So it was like, "Oh, okay. We need to get ready for this." It almost there wasn't almost enough time to be nervous. It was just more we need to get ready for this, you know. So the first time was really cool having those couple matches, having that experience quite early on what in my career was really cool, and I almost think I didn't appreciate them as much at the time because it's more thinking, well, it's happened 2 years into wrestling, 2-3 years into wrestling, it's just going to keep happening. And then it didn't for a while. We didn't go back, and I didn't get the call again until COVID,
mm,
where again it was just a Wednesday. I was at the stage where gyms were open, but we weren't still allowed crowds and stuff for live events. Because I remember
mm,
just being in the gym, and I was just sat on the leg press waiting for my next set, and I got a message from ICW, from Scott Reed, saying, "Hey man, are you available for tapings on Friday?" And I was like, yeah. I mean, I'm not doing anything else. It's everything's shut. So it was quite cool. And again, it was really weird going in and doing my first sort of work as a singles guy with an ICW with no crowd, but it
mhm,
was one where I knew it was an opportunity, um, and I knew that it was one that I couldn't let pass me by. And I almost went in with the attitude of I felt I should have been wrestling at ICW before COVID and stuff.
mhm,
Again, it's just me thinking I'm good enough to do it. So when I went in with the attitude of I'm going to make sure that this isn't just you're coming and doing a couple sets of tapings and then that's going to be you. I went in thinking I'm going to go in and make sure that they see me and think we need this guy on our roster full
mhm.
time.
Ah, good to hear, my friend. That's a real make your statement there. And I've always been curious about, because I've spoken to previous ICW people who've worked during the pandemic, Shane Monet and other individuals, working without crowds. Do you think that's kind of like an interesting skill set you've had? Like you can say, like, oh, I've done this.
Again, it was weird because there's no real way to prepare for it
Mm,
because no one's ever really had to do it before. And it was one of the strangest things I've ever had to do because again it's totally different from working, for example, wrestling in front of like a training match when the guys who you train with are there. It's
mm,
different from that in the aspect of they're at least still giving you, while it's probably a bit of an artificial reaction, there's something there. Whereas when you're not wrestling for anybody that's there, it's just so strange. It's just there's no real way to prepare for it, and it's just one where you go in, you're having to still react to an audience. You're still having to do the same thing you would do for an audience without the audience being there. And it was is a crazy time, and it's a skill set that I can now say, I've done this.
Mm,
Hopefully I never have to do it again. Hopefully we never go through a period like that. But it's one where I think it would have made everyone who had to do it better performers, better wrestlers, because it's just, again, it's another skill in the tool set. It's
mm.
just something where you've been thrown so out of your comfort zone that you need to adapt. And again, it's almost that sink or swim where you need to be able to adapt to whatever environment you're in. And I think as a roster, I think we all rose to that challenge and put on shows that belonged on the WWE network.
Oh, absolutely. You put on bangers of matches throughout the whole pandemic era and kept people entertained in the darkest of times. But you mentioned the WWE network as well, and ICW was on the network till fairly recently, and now they're on Fight. And there was some thumbnails there, but there was one of you thumbnail on the WWE network. I mean, I can't imagine how it would have felt being a fan as a kid to now seeing, oh shit, there's me on the thumbnail of ICW next to all the big greats.
Yeah, so I was actually the thumbnail of the very first time I was on the WWE network. The first show that went up with me, I was the thumbnail, and I didn't know when my episode was going up on the network. And I was I can't remember where I was, but I wasn't home, and I just got bombarded with messages from all my friends and stuff, and they were like, it was just a screenshot, and it was Brock Lesnar's face and then my face, and I was and they were like, your episode's on the network, and I was just a bit like, oh, okay, and I was like, this is really cool, but again, me being me, I was just like, this is really cool, it's something that's happened, great, but I want to push on. It
Mm,
wasn't one where I sat and dwelled on it for too long. It was just in the moment I took the time to appreciate it. Appreciate it was something that I imagine doesn't happen to everyone. Um it was something I didn't think would ever happen, but it happened, and I appreciated it, but I was like, okay, cool. The attitude I have, I was like, oh, that's great. But the next show's coming up, or the next tapings are coming up in a few weeks. I
mhm.
need to get ready. I need to go and push on with that. Just constantly striving to just be better instead of try to dwell on things. I always think, right, what's next?
Aye, very much so. You can live in the moment for a wee bit, but there's always climbing up. You always got to be climbing. You can't just stay stationary because you never know what is around the next corner. And I know you've had some matches in ICW, but one I always thought was interesting was the Glasgow street fight, Ravy Davy and yourself. I mean, Glasgow's a street fight in itself, but I mean, what was that like doing a street fight?
It was it was interesting. Again, like the whole the whole day was mental. It was a lot of fun. It's not a type of match I've wrestled many times. I don't do, as you can tell, I don't do many hardcore style matches. I don't do many street fights and whatnot. I think I've done one unsanctioned match before and one TLC match before, and I think that was it. So going and doing the street fight with the stipulation of, if I win, I bring rules into ICW. So it was a great story to tell, a really really good story, and having, for example, Ravy Davy across the ring from me, somebody who essentially was the antithesis of what I'm going for.
Mm.
Um, it was a perfect story, and going into the Barrowlands, it was a day I was really really excited for, a match I was really excited for, because while I don't do many of those types of matches, when I do, I want to make sure that the story's right. I want to make sure that I'm going in, well, one, to win, to make sure the rules stay, so I have to do less of those matches. But it was the culmination of me and Davey being at a bit loggerheads for a few weeks, me wanting to bring rules into ICW, a more traditional style of wrestling into ICW, which obviously ICW isn't exactly famous for. It's obviously famous for the street fights, for the Glasgow street fights, for the King of Insanity matches and whatnot. So it was just telling that story of somebody trying to bring a bit of not authority, structure to the matches, a bit of some rules, and more traditional style wrestling. So going in, having that street fight, doing things, taking, for example, getting thrown on thumbtacks, elbow drop through a table onto the outside, just stuff like that was a phenomenal experience.
Hell of experience when you've got little tiny holes in the back in your back and you're all fucked up. It's like, oof, yeah, that's Monday. But
Yep.
progressing down the line, you would gain gold. You'd be the golden savior as you would win the Zero G championship, defeating Daz Black. After that match, having the championship in your hands, I can't imagine how you were feeling.
It was great. It was another night that was very, very cool. Very cool. And again, one of the nights where I did take some time to myself to just sit, look at the title, and almost appreciate where I was, and to be any form of champion, to hold any form of gold, in a company like ICW, like you said, the top promotion in Scotland, was it was phenomenal. It was surreal. And again, I come back to telling the story where the Zero G division is all about high flyers, defying gravity.
Mm.
And then who better to win the Zero G title than the guy who, again, is the antithesis of all of that, the guy who's all about traditional wrestling, who doesn't leave his feet, who doesn't go up to the top rope. And again, I went out, wrestled Daz, and Daz is absolutely phenomenal. I hope he recovers from his injury soon. But again, going out there with Daz, somebody who again is the poster boy for high flying wrestling in Scotland, in the UK, legitimately one of the best high flyers in Europe. So going out there and telling that story with him, where he is everything people want to see from the Zero G division, against me, who's probably what people don't want to see in the Zero G division, going out, telling that story, having a match that I loved, and then just being able to experience the winning feeling after it was great. I took a second in the ring just to soak it up, and just appreciate the fact that I was in that position.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate the fact that the people in charge of ICW, believed in me enough to put me in a position to win the Zero G title. Was just it was quite humbling. It was really cool to be in that position and just know that, okay, I'm doing something. I'm doing something right here.
It shows a very high sense of respect. They're trusting you. I did that feel it for you, like that true validation, like the company's trusting me with one of your gold titles.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's something that I didn't ever expect to happen when I started wrestling. But to be in that position where I am thinking, okay, I have that trust. It is almost it is quite it's quite humbling. It is, because it feels like what I'm doing, the work I'm putting into the company, is being appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, again, I'm doing something right. They like the stories I'm telling. They appreciate the work I'm doing in the ring. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep bringing me back. They wouldn't have put me in a position to win the Zero G title, and they wouldn't have given me that opportunity. So it's quite rewarding, and it's quite humbling at the same time.
Yeah, of course, it's great to hear. As they say, nothing lasts forever, sadly, and you would eventually drop the Zero G Championship at the 11th annual Square Go. The 11th annual Square Go is quite monumental. It's the first sort of freedom show for ICW. Not on the network. Putting it on Fight as well. And also, you would lose the championship. But I want to talk about that crowd, because the ICW crowd are fun bunch. They're a fun bunch.
Yeah.
I just want to know, having that match and feeling that crowd energy, it must have felt joyful.
I don't know. I don't know if joyful is the word about hundreds of people telling me that somebody has had relations with my mother. I don't know if joyful is the right word for that. They're a rowdy bunch. Yeah. It was an experience being in that ring and being heckled the way I was, having things said about my mother the way they were. It was an experience.
Cheeky bastards. Very
Yeah,
cheeky bastard, the Glaswegians. They're not like
very
the
much.
the Edinburgh folk. civilized, as we say. You know, I had Thatcher right on, and Thatcher, he talks about wanting to bring order to ICW, you know, to get this in line. And I need to know, for you as a savior, what's your plans to save the ICW universe and get them in line?
Well, first off, the plan is obviously get the F out, keep the rules, because personally, rules make wrestling better. I mean, they do. That's just my opinion. They do. So the original plan, or the initial plan, is win King of Insanity, become a god, a savior, and a king. So that is the trifecta there. So obviously keep the rules in ICW, and then once the order, once that is kept, then we can look at, then the goal obviously turns to more gold and finding ways to then essentially just show and prove to the fans that I am the wrestling god, I am their savior, and everything I do in ICW is for the fans. It is to try and make it better for them. It's just not my fault. They don't appreciate that.
They never will. I mean, they really need to understand that rules are rules to be followed. But feel, you know, there are strength in numbers, my friend. And I need to know, saviors have their merry men, their followers. Is there anyone you think maybe you could align yourself with to get your message across?
Probably. I'm sure there's a few people who would want to become a disciple of the savior of professional wrestling. I've had many offers. I'm just waiting for the right disciples, ones who I think can carry out my bidding.
Well, who knows what could be in store for the future of the savior of professional wrestling. But hey, you got to save ICW first, then you can save the world, as they say.
That's it.
That's great to hear, my friend. But you know, the UK wrestling scene is buzzing right now, especially with AEW. They're coming in for Wembley Stadium and all in, you know, in August. And I want to know, Theo, working in the UK wrestling scene, what does it mean to have such a big company as AEW coming in for Wembley Stadium? That's going to be a hell of a thing.
Yeah, and again, it shows that wrestling in the UK is alive and kicking. It's thriving. The fact that AEW want to come over here and not just aim for example, Craven Cottage, which obviously Tony Khan owns, or Nick Khan owns. Not Nick Khan, Tony's dad owns, sorry. Which obviously
Too many cans. Too many cans.
Too many cans. Which obviously Tony Khan's dad owns. So yeah, obviously the fact he's going for Wembley Stadium, 90,000 people, it just shows that there's obviously a market for it here. Otherwise, I don't think they would have just gone for Wembley Stadium without doing their research and stuff before it. But from what I gather, from what I think people are saying, is that there's already a massive waiting list for tickets. So again, if AEW do well in the UK, that only serves to benefit every single independent wrestling company in the UK, because them doing well at Wembley, them selling out Wembley, is just a great advert for wrestling in general in the UK, because it creates more of a buzz, which then means more people are more likely to go to independent shows, which again means more opportunities for guys like myself who are wrestling.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. You know, the big companies help the smaller companies, but at the end of the day, it's all wrestling. It all flows down with the way business works, you know. And the Yankees, or the Americans, the old crazy bunch, they don't think they can sell it out. They don't think we're passionate enough to sell out Wembley Stadium. But I want to know, if do you think we can? Do you think the UK wrestling fans can sell out Wembley?
Yeah, and I don't even think it's going to just be the UK fans. I mean, it's a show which is going to attract people from all over Europe. So I don't think it'll have a problem selling out at all.
Easy peasy. And you know, the dream matches, everyone has their dream match. But I want to know, if Tony Khan came to you and said, "Hey, I need you to save at Wembley Stadium," and he said, pick a guy from the AEW roster, you can have a match. Is there anyone in your list that you would love to make magic in the ring with?
From AEW, it would have to be either CM Punk or Bryan Danielson. They'd be the two. They'd be the two I'd want to go and have a match with. To be honest,
they are two very good names indeed. You know, but I want to know, what do you think will be the main event? Because people are speculating that it could be CM Punk, FTR versus the Elite. But I want to know, what do you think, or what would you like to see be the main event of AEW All In?
What I'd like to see would probably be that 6-man tag, because everybody knows personal issues draw money. And it's one where I think the promos and the lead up to it would be phenomenal, because obviously there is that real element there. So that's what I would like to see, but whether or not they can get that match on the table, I don't know. But I think that's probably what anyone who has any interest in AEW would want to see.
That's the one that's going to sell tickets. Well, Theo, I very much appreciate you taking time out of your day to appear on the Soul Sessions. But, to end it off, I want to, speak to the viewers now, and from someone who's wrestled in the independent scene and not known it much of the UK independent scene, what do you think the UK independent scene means to professional wrestling?
I think it's one of the, if not the best independent scene out there. I think there's so much talent that doesn't get the recognition it deserves. I think there's so many great companies that I've been fortunate to be a part of, like Discovery Wrestling, which I think is massively underappreciated. I think they should be having crowds of 400, 500, 600 every show. I think the quality of wrestling Disco puts on is second to none. ICW as well, for everything from the in-ring product to the storytelling and everything. Again, I think rivals. I do think the storytelling in ICW rivals companies like WWE and AEW, and it shows by how popular ICW is on Fight. That the stories are good, the wrestling quality is second to none. So I think that the UK independent scene is one that is massively, almost underrated, I think. And again, I think it's ready to explode again. I think that obviously ICW, when they were in the Hydro and whatnot, selling thousands and thousands of tickets for one show, and again, Progress being as popular as it was, I think all these companies, I think they're just a little spark away from something happening in the UK. I think back when it initially exploded, when it exploded a few years ago, I think the little spark was, for example, Drew coming back. That helped massively. So I think we are just that one little spark away from everybody in the world taking notice of the UK scene again. And that little spark could be AEW at Wembley.
Yeah, well, you never know when the spark's going to light the keg and blow the whole thing wide open. But, Theo, if the viewers, you want to find out more Theo Doros and be saved, his Instagram description will be in the link for this YouTube video. But, Theo, if they want to see you wrestle in person, what kind of dates have you got lined up?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I know that my next outing is May 14th at the ICW at the Garage. Get the F out. Me versus Jack Jester, King of Insanity. And that's the next one. The next time you can see me at Discovery will be July 1st in Edinburgh for the Disco Derby.
Well, that's a hell of a lineup. And viewers, as I said before, Instagram description for Theo will be in the description below. Check him out, give him a follow, and keep up to date. Well, Theo Doros, I very much appreciate you for saving us for these couple of last minutes. But hey, I've been Soul, host of the Soul Sessions, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have a lovely day.